What's up friends, welcome back to the channel, and on today's video we are looking at possibly the lightest and most nimble daily trainer slash up-tempo daily trainer that I've ever run. Today we're digging into the New Balance Rebel V4. Let's get into it. Time for those disclosures. This video is in cooperation with my friends over at Roadrunner Sports. Roadrunner Sports was good enough to send me a pair of the Rebel V4 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say. They don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, let's get started with price. The Rebel V4 will cost you $140, and right off the bat, that is an excellent price for this shoe. And look, I know $140 is still a lot of money, but when we look at it and line it up to the competition, and not just in the daily trainer competition, but the competition of running shoes, $140 is definitely on the lower end of that price spectrum. And as far as looks goes, I think New Balance has really knocked it out of the park with this one, and of course the SC Elite V4. I'm loving this angled look. It just looks really sharp. So let's get going with a few specs. We have 30mm in the heel, 24 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. Now, holding that up, that looks like a little more than 30mm to me in the heel. And of course, the sidewall of this midsole foam does extend up just a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that that number, that 30mm, is just the midsole foam and the outsole rubber. So we do have a removable insert, which certainly adds another couple of millimeters. So again, comparing it to the competition, the Rebel V4 is a mid-cushion shoe. And I did start off by talking about weight. That's because the weight is absolutely phenomenal. New Balance claims that a US men's size 9 tips the scale at 7.5 ounces or 212 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it only tips the scale at 9.1 ounces or 257 grams. This shoe is light on the scale and it feels like a feather on my feet. Now, recently I have been reviewing a lot of shoes in this kind of segment of the daily trainer market, and I did say it in another video, but I'm going to say it again because it holds true for the Rebel V4, and that is the New Balance Rebel V4 makes me reconsider the whole daily trainer market. And that is because if New Balance is able to make a shoe like this, something that is so light, so comfortable, so airy, so wispy, and they're also able to pack in a little bit of performance, it really makes me question those heavier daily trainers that are really built up, kind of over-engineered. Now, I know there's a place for it. Sometimes, especially if we're running in a colder climate, we're going to want a heavier upper, maybe. Personally, I don't get to run in a colder climate very often, so I'm very happy for this lightweight mesh upper. Let's talk about some of the materials, and of course, we'll start at the top, we'll work our way down. I'm holding it up for you guys to see. We can see they've got a very thinly padded heel collar. Of course, there is enough padding there to hold your foot in place, but they haven't gone over the top like in some other daily trainers where they just seem to cram as much padding as possible in the heel collar. The heel counter it's semi-rigid. It seems like we have perhaps a thin piece of plastic here in the back, but it's not absolutely rigid. I'm able to pinch it. I'm able to kind of push it down like this. But either way, I did get a good heel lockdown in the Rebel V4, which is actually quite surprising to me, but we'll get to that in just a second. Now, the upper is super light. It's New Balance's Phantom Fit upper. It's a lightweight, very breathable mesh, and simply, it's very good. It definitely seems resilient enough to work for a daily trainer. It feels nice when I'm touching it. And of course, because it is so light, it does need a couple of overlays or underlays. We can see a little bit of material overlay coming around the heel collar. We've got the New Balance branding here on the lateral side. On the medial side, it's a little bit smaller branding, but something that you probably can't see on the camera is that there is an orange band on both sides, the medial and the lateral side, and it just kind of adds a little support to this midfoot section of the shoe. So when you cinch it down, the upper does wrap around your foot. We've got the fairly standard overlays coming right along the base of the upper, between the upper and the midsole, and then an underlay coming around the toe box just to keep that off your toes. And then of course we've got some reinforcements coming along the eyelet chain. The tongue is gusseted on both sides. We have a single lace loop right here in the middle. Now the tongue is very thin. It's a very thin piece of foam, and it kind of has a rough edge on the top. It looks a little unfinished, and again, that rough unfinished look is kind of seen here on the edges of the lace loop. And to me, it seems that the tongue doesn't actually fit with the rest of the shoe. The rest of the shoe seems very well made, and just my opinion, it seems like the quality of material used in the tongue doesn't fit with the rest of the shoe, but I see what New Balance was doing. They wanted something extremely light. It's breathable. They've got their laser cut holes in it to add to the breathability, and honestly, the tongue works. When I had the laces cinched down across the top of my foot, I didn't experience any lace bite, so even though I'm not a fan of how the tongue looks, the tongue does its job and it doesn't move. And can we ask for more than that? Probably not. Now, I'm going to circle back around to fit, but let's come down to the midsole, because New Balance has made a big change with their fuel cell formulation this year, and this year it's a blend of EVA and PIBA. To be honest, I don't know what the blend is, what ratio of EVA to PIBA, but I tend to think that if you put PIBA in the marketing materials, it's going to sell a little more. I think we as runners are generally attracted to a PIBA midsole shoe. And then if we come down to the outsole, we have a lot of rubber. We've got this strategically placed rubber right here on the outside, and we've got a lot of rubber up on the forefoot, which is impressive considering its weight. Now, the rubber on this outsole isn't ridiculously thick. It's quite thin, but for the volume that I've put in this shoe, it seems to be holding up very well. In fact, even on this lateral heel edge, I'm really not seeing any wear. So the rubber is doing its job. It's protecting the shoe. And look, we do want that. First and foremost, this is a daily trainer. Now, it's a light daily trainer, so it's also going to be made for picking up the pace. And if you just have one shoe in your rotation, I think the New Balance Rebel V4 is going to be a good option for you because it's going to work at those easier paces, and it's light enough where it's going to feel good when you pick up the pace. So again, I'm going to circle back to ride, but let's just talk about fit. Look, I don't know if you can tell by looking at it, but this is a high volume shoe. And New Balance makes wide versions in a lot of their shoes, but I think that if your feet are just a little wider than narrow, I think the regular sizing of the Rebel V4 is going to work for you. There is just a lot of room all around this shoe, and that's why I said that it was a little surprising that I had a good heel lockdown, because everything else about the shoe just feels a little big on my foot. Now, in the Rebel V4's defense, I do have quite narrow feet, but that's not to say that the Rebel V4 didn't work for me. I was able to cinch these laces down, and I got a very comfortable and locked down feeling across my midfoot. The toe box felt absolutely great. It just felt like there was a lot of room. But if I hold it up, you can see right here, there is a little bit of puckering right here at the first lace loop, and then you can see how close my laces are together. And that's when it's been loosened to get my foot out of the shoe. So these laces are very cinched together when the shoe is cinched down and on my foot. Let's just turn it around and show you the outsole. This shoe just seems remarkably wide. It seems wide in the heel, wide in the midfoot, and definitely wide in the forefoot. And again, for me, I'm not so sure that that is the best type of platform that works well for me. It did feel very stable when I was running, and that's just because the base was so wide. It's certainly not a stability shoe. There are no stability elements built into it. It's just a nice wide shoe. So when my foot plants, I feel like it's not going anywhere. So moving on to ride. And when I first put my foot into the Rebel V4, the stepping comfort was phenomenal. I laced it up, I tied it down, and immediately I'm noticing how light this shoe is on my foot. And it's refreshing. It feels really good having something so light on your foot. It feels like you really want to pick up the pace. Now, I have sampled all paces in the Rebel V4. I've taken it out for easy runs, running through the gears, through tempo, interval pace, strides at the end of easy runs, and the shoe feels good at all those paces. Is it ideal at intervals or strides? Well, yes for strides, maybe not so much for intervals. I really did enjoy having such a light package on my foot when my legs were tied at the end of an easy run and I had to pick up the pace. It seemed to turn over very nicely and that energy of return was there. For intervals that are substantially longer than strides, it probably wouldn't be my first choice, but then again, we're living in a time when there is such a specificity with shoes. I think if we have the option, we're going to go with something perhaps plated, something that lets us take advantage of the shoe a little more in order to get our workouts done. But in a pinch, the Rebel V4 would work very well, mainly because it's so light. Easy runs were just the same, they felt good. I think there is enough padding here for it to feel protective, or at least I thought that on my kind of regular daily runs where I run between 7 and 8 miles. But I did take this shoe out for a easy paced half marathon distance run. And while doing that run, I thought to myself around the 10-mile mark that the shoe wasn't feeling as protective as I thought it did in the beginning of the run. So it's difficult for me to explain why that happened. Perhaps after an hour and a half of running, my weight was compressing the midsole and it wasn't expanding to its full volume. I'm not sure. All I know is that after about that hour and a half mark, which is probably the pace I was running to get to 10 miles, I noticed that the shoe felt a lot firmer than it did in the beginning. And it was after that run that I thought to myself that I probably wouldn't choose the Rebel V4 as a non-plated race day option for the marathon. Now, some of you may be rolling your eyes like, Matt, why would you ever choose a lightweight daily trainer to run a marathon when there are so many plated shoes out there? Well, you'd be right. But I'm sure there are some people out there that just want one pair of shoes and they want it to do everything. But for me, someone who likes a little more cushion in their shoe, after running for that 90 minutes, the shoe just didn't feel as cushioned as it did in the beginning of the run. So who do I think this shoe is for? And to be absolutely honest, I think this shoe is fantastic. I think it's going to work for a lot of people. I think the main thing holding people back from the Rebel V4 is the volume of the upper. For someone with narrow feet, I think maybe just a better fitting upper is going to work for them. Yes, the Rebel V4 worked for me with narrow feet, but I did have to cinch it in and the shoe still felt very wide on my foot. Now, of course, we can spin this into the positive positive by talking about the stability, but it did feel wide on my foot. With that said, it still felt light, still felt peppy. I think there is enough rubber on the outsole for it to last an appropriate amount of time, but like I said, on the paper, the specs are very good for the V4. I just think you have to have a little bit of a wider foot in order to really appreciate it, at least wider than my foot. Let's leave it there. Alright guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have run in the New Balance Rebel V4, or if you are thinking of picking up a pair for yourself, drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. But for now, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the New Balance Rebel V4. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.